Welcome to a video on secure file transfer protocol in decisions. In this video, we will look at the following topics. What is FTP? The need of FTP? What is SFTP? SFTP architecture and SFTP in decisions. We will also look at a short demonstration of FTP in the decisions platform. So what is FTP and why is it needed? FTP is a standard communication protocol that operates in the network layer. There are other communication protocols like HTTP that are used for file transfer. However, FTP is preferred over HTTP because it can transfer large, bulky files over the network. Also, HTTP is mostly used for accessing web pages. FTP encourages the direct use of remote computers. It shields users from system variations like differences between systems in operating system, directory structures, file structures, etc. It also promotes sharing of files and other data types. The only drawback of FTP is that all data, including the username and password, is transferred as plain text, which makes it easy for an attacker to intercept this transmission. To overcome the drawback of FTP, we have SFTP, which is Secure File Transfer Protocol. It is also a network protocol to share files using the internet. SFTP architecture. An SFTP file transfer starts with a transfer request from a client system and it uses port 22 to process the client request. Now, this establishes a connection with the SFTP interface as shown in the diagram, and it requests the transfer of files from the SFTP server. The files that are being transferred over the network are encrypted using secure shell algorithms like DSA, RSA, etc. And finally, decrypted file reaches the client system. Now let us see how to use SFTP or FTP in decisions. For this demonstration, we need to establish a client-server architecture to access the files from the FTP server. So here we have an FTP server at this particular host with 3 different files in it. Now let us use decisions as a client to access these files. Open a Flow Designer in the Decision Studio and access the FTP steps from integration and the FTP folder. These steps are broadly divided into 6 categories. To create a directory in the FTP server, deleting a file using FTP, downloading a file from the remote server, to list all the files present on the remote server, move a file from one directory path to another, and upload a file from the physical system or the client system to the remote server. Now let us look at these steps one by one, starting with list remote files. So let me get this list remote files and make a connection to the FTP server. The host is this one, which uses a port of 21, and we need a FTP user to connect to the remote server. The remote path is / and it returns a list of files that can be read and processed further in the flow. Now let's start debugging and see that the files that are there on the remote server is being returned here. Next, let us see how to download a file from the remote server. For that, we use the download step and fill in the properties. Again, we use the FTP user for the username and the password. Now, the file name that we want to download here would be mydata.txt, which is there on the remote server. So let's give the output file name as mydata.txt, and the remote file path would be /mydata.txt. Please note here that we have to give the file path along with the file name for the remote file path property. And it will return file data as the output that can be further processed in the flow. So let us debug that and see the input and output. Another step that is very similar to download is the download to file system. So let's see what this step does and how is it different from the download step. Configure the properties of the download to file system step as shown here. Here we need to give the output file path, which is the physical path in the client system. I'm using this as the client system where I will download the file mydata.txt from the remote server to the client system. So copy the physical path and give it in the properties. Ensure that you also mention the file name here. The remote file path would be /mydata.txt. So let's debug this. And we see that the data is found and it is downloaded to the client system. One thing to note here is the difference between download to file system and the download step. Download step provides the file data to the flow designer, which can be further processed in the flow, whereas the download to file system does not return any file data and only places the file in the physical path that is provided. The next step that we would look at is create remote FTP directory. So I want to now make a directory in this remote path by the name new directory. So let's give that in the remote path and debug. Now, as you see here, we have created this directory in the remote server. Now let's move this document into the new directory. So for that, we would get the move file by FTP and configure its properties. For the destination file, we would give /new directory /mydoc.docs. And for the remote source file path, we give /mydoc.docs, where the file is actually present. So let's now debug this to see the changes. It says the file is moved. Let's cross-verify that in the remote server. So as you see here, upon refreshing the remote server, the mydoc is no longer present here and can be found inside the new directory. Let's also see what the upload step does. The upload step uploads a file from our local system to the remote FTP server. So let's choose a file from the local system. For that, use the constant mapping option for the file property and choose a file. So here I'm choosing the file called upload file. And I am giving the path as /new directory that would place this file in the new directory that I created /upload file.txt. So let's debug this and see that in action. If we go back to the remote server and access the new directory, we would see that this upload file.txt is being uploaded to the remote FTP server. Finally, let's choose the delete file step to delete the file that we have just created. So for that, again, configure the properties. And for the remote file path, give the entire path as /new directory /upload file.txt. So let's debug this now. And we see that the file is deleted. This can be cross-verified by going back to the remote server and refreshing this page. Now, as you see, that upload file text is being deleted.